We begin this hour in Ottawa, where the government is under fire from opposition and some security experts. The issue? A contract to provide and maintain RCMP communications equipment, which was awarded to a company with ties to the Chinese government. Radio Canada uncovered the story, and the Prime Minister responded earlier.
I find it disconcerting that while parts of the government's security agencies were advising us as a government and as Canadians that we have to be very careful about foreign interference in our institutions, in our structures, in the way we do business and keep Canadians safe, that other parts of the civil service were signing contracts that have questionable levels of security. So absolutely we're going to be following up on this, finding out, first of all, what needs to be done to ensure that our communications technology is secure, but also make sure we're figuring out how this could continue to happen.
Karina Roman is on this story for us in Ottawa. Karina, let's start with some of the details of that contract.
So in October 2021, St. Clair Technologies was awarded this $500,000 contract to maintain basically and troubleshoot this radio frequency filtering system for the RCMP. Now that system basically means is about protecting the RCMP's land-based communications from eavesdropping. It's about secure communications essentially. Now St. Clair is Ontario-based, but it's controlled by a Chinese company called Hytera Communications since 2017 when Hytera bought St. Clair's parent company. Now there were concerns raised then about this takeover, about this buyout, but at that time the government and Trudeau himself reassured that reviews had been done and there were no national security concerns. That said, the FCC in the U.S. blacklisted Hytera in 2021, citing unacceptable risk to national security, and Hytera is now facing 21 charges in an American espionage case, and that came to light in January 2022, this year. So they're accused of basically conspiring to steal trade secrets from a well-known company, Motorola, from 2007 to 2020. Now, so this contract is awarded, and experts are saying the risk, of course, is that they have access to the very software that's supposed to prevent eavesdropping. Public Service and Procurement Canada, which is the department that awarded the contract, says that the criteria did not include security requirements. It did not include anything about ownership of the company. And those criteria are usually given by what's known as the client department, which was Public Safety Canada. So, of course, questions to the Public Safety Minister today, Marco Mendicino. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
We're eyes wide open about the threats that are posed by hostile state and non-state actors, and that includes the PRC. One of the reasons why we put in place a process that looks at the potential opportunities or vectors for foreign interference in the context of contracts is to secure Canadian national interests, to secure our national security. And so what I have done in the light of this report is to instruct my officials to look very closely at the details of that contract and also to work with our officials to review the process by which this contract was awarded.
Now, installation work is already underway in Ontario and Saskatchewan, and so both security experts and critics of the government are calling for not only the contract to be ripped up, but for the installation work that's already begun to be ripped out.
Now, Karina, we've heard a bit of what the Prime Minister had to say. What other reaction is this getting?
Well, of course, it's getting it from all opposition leaders. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre today on this, blaming Justin Trudeau as leader of the government, as the Prime Minister, says the contract should be cancelled, and really commented on the contrary nature of what this software and this communication system is supposed to be and who the contract was awarded to. Have a listen.
Let's put this into perspective. This is a contract for anti-eavesdropping technology to be used by our police force that was awarded to a company whose owner is charged with 21 potential espionage crimes in the United States of America. I mean, it's almost something that you'd expect to be out of a spy novel, but characters in spy novels would never be that incompetent.
Now, I should point out that those charges that he's talking about weren't announced until 2022, but there were plenty of red flags in 2021, which is what led to the U.S. FCC, blacklisting Hytera Communications in 2021. Now, the NDP and the Bloc Québécois also commenting, their leaders out today, saying similar things, basically finding this quite shocking. Have a listen.
It's something that should never have happened. So I'm deeply concerned. I think that there is a real risk here, and it shows that the government did not take the appropriate steps to vet this project or the company.
I'm a little bit tired of hearing this government pretending to be strong in front of China, while it is so weak, without a spine.
So critics saying that, this is just part of a pattern with the government. I mean, it was slow to come out with its Indo-Pacific strategy that we just got revealed this last month in November. It was the last of the Five Eyes countries to ban Huawei in terms of the 5G network. This only came to light because of the great investigative reporting by Radio-Canada and Mark Godbout. So, if that hadn't happened, this contract would still stand and the installation would definitely be going ahead. Now, we don't know whether it will stop or the contract will get ripped out because the government is being quite tight-lipped about what the next steps might be, other than to say, as you heard, that they're looking into it.
Okay, Karina, thank you for breaking it all down.
You're welcome.
So as Karina said, despite all the red flags, how could this still happen? So let's have someone else discuss this with us. I'm joined now by Connor Healy. He is the Director of Government Research at IPVM. It's a security and surveillance research group based in the United States. Welcome to the program.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Let's get right into this. What is your reaction to Ottawa awarding this contract to a company tied to the Chinese government?
Well, let me put it to you this way. At IPVM, my job is to analyze the decisions that governments around the world make on security, from California to Colombia and, of course, China. And this is the most ludicrous decision I've ever seen in my career so far.
Okay, that sums it up pretty well. So Hytera has been criminally indicted in the U.S. for conspiring to steal trade secrets, has been blacklisted there. How could Canada not look at that when agreeing to this contract?
Well, I think that's a very important part of this story. It's important to be clear there are specific concerns here. The risks are not just hypothetical or not just because the company is Chinese. Motorola has already won a $700 million judgment against Hytera for that theft. And then a year and a half ago, the U.S. Department of Justice indicted them on 21 counts of stealing information. This was easily Googled. We wrote reports on it that were public. This was very widely in the public sphere, not to mention that the security risks that have been a big topic in the United States, specifically pertaining to Hytera. There's been legislation in the U.S. since 2018 that has banned federal purchases of these goods. The question I would ask the RCMP is, how can you possibly give a criminally indicted organization tied to the very foreign forces that the RCMP is supposed to counteract in its counterintelligence mission, how can you give that company top secret clearances, top secret RCMP encryption codes and radio frequencies, and physical access at multiple stages to the technology that's used for the RCMP's nationwide communications infrastructure? It's just baffling.
Just talk about what type of access could potentially have been out there.
Well, there are a few different ways to look at this. Getting access to the system, I think, would be a no-brainer for the Chinese Ministry of State Security, which is very aggressive. They have access to the devices at the manufacturing level, both in China and in Canada, and there are vulnerabilities that creates in terms of installing spyware on the devices that could be very difficult to detect. They would have access to them physically, both in terms of installing them and maintaining them. In terms of the data they could have access to, the risks include eavesdropping, collecting communications data, everything from the actual communications to knowing who is talking to whom and when. And this isn't just a regular conversation, that this is the RCMP we're talking about. Everything from counterintelligence to the Prime Minister's own protection detail, they use RCMP communication systems. I mean, why wouldn't China want access to this? This would be a great system to get access to. And there are multiple vulnerabilities it creates. And another important one, by the way, is just the ability to shut the system down, which itself could be very damaging in a crisis.
Wow. I'm not sure if you heard the Prime Minister's response to this today, and Canada's Public Safety Minister. I see you nodding, you did. What did you think of the fact that there was no immediate reaction to cancel the contract or pull out the current, it's not installed everywhere, but to pull that out immediately?
Well, I have a couple of thoughts on that. I mean, the Prime Minister's initial reaction seemed to be to blame the public servants and the RCMP. And, he might be technically correct that this procurement decision was made at the RCMP. I mean, Prime Minister Trudeau didn't make this decision himself. But, I mean, this is a situation that shows fundamental problems at the RCMP. So I do think he's accountable, even if he's not directly responsible. As for the Minister of Public Safety, I hope I'm not misquoting him. I believe he said that we're clear-eyed on the threat of foreign intelligence, including China. It's really not looking like that today. And it hasn't looked like that for some time. I mean, I myself am a Canadian, even though I'm based in Washington, D.C. And, today is just yet another day. This is what it is to be a Canadian based in Washington, D.C. One is in a constant state of embarrassment over as I love my country, but we're making bad decisions when it comes to China. And it's embarrassing.
You mentioned that it's embarrassing. It was easily Google. You could Google it. So would you say this hurts Canada's reputation with allies who may hesitate to share some intelligence with our country?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In particular with the U.S., I would expect that some tough discussions are about to take place between CSIS, RCMP, and U.S. authorities and their counterparts, if they haven't started already. I mean, let me just give you a sense of how seriously the United States takes the risks from Hytera. Not only is the federal government banned from buying it, but everyone in the entire federal contracting sphere is banned too, whether you're a big defense manufacturer or whether you're a janitorial services provider. In fact, if you deliver cupcakes to the federal government and you use a Hytera radio in your own facility or kitchen, you'll have your contract canceled. And that's because they take this so seriously, they don't even want people 1 degree of separation away from them using these devices. And so I can only imagine that, the FBI and the CIA and various other agencies that share information with Canada, which is a very valuable thing that we have, particularly when it comes to China, I can only imagine that they're going to be pretty hesitant to keep sharing information with the RCMP if they think it's going to end up back in Beijing.
Wow.
So even if we don't worry about the risk to our own communications, I think we should worry about what this does to our relationships.
Just looking ahead a couple of days, a couple of weeks, what do you think needs to happen now?
Well, frankly, the government should cancel the contract. But it needs to go so much further than that. I mean, Hannah, as someone in journalism, you'll know that every once in a while there's a story that comes along that's just so baffling, it's clear that its implications go way beyond the story itself. And I think that's the situation here. There needs to be a public inquiry or parliamentary investigation or whatever the appropriate investigative method is, because this wasn't just one bad decision that was made by one person at the RCMP. It was clearly a series of bad decisions made by several people. Your report today shows fundamental problems at one of our nation's most important security services. It's not just about this one contract. That's exactly the sort of situation where you need to bring in oversight.
Okay, Connor Healy, thank you for digging into this topic with us. I really appreciate your insights. Connor Healy is the Director of Government Research at the Security and Surveillance Research Group, IPVM.